Rain tapped against the floor-to-ceiling glass walls of the upscale Manhattan restaurant, the city lights beyond blurred by the downpour. Inside, at a small corner table, a young woman sat alone. Sophia's fingers twined nervously in her lap as she stared at the single tiny candle on the personal-sized cake before her. She mustered a fragile smile that nobody saw. This was her birthday, and she had chosen to spend it by herself. By choice, she reminded herself, though the ache in her chest told a more complicated story. Her phone lay face up next to her plate, lighting up occasionally with meaningless notifications, but not the one she longed for. Earlier, there had been a few obligatory well wishes, a generic HBD, text from a coworker, a brief call from her mother that ended as soon as it began. The photo she'd posted of her solitary birthday. Dessert had been viewed by all, her old friends, yet not a single one had reached out, and of course no message from him. Not that she truly expected her ex to remember the very birthday he'd ruined last year. The sting of that betrayal still hadn't faded. If anything, it was the reason she preferred to be alone tonight rather than risk more heartbreak. Sophia inhaled slowly, willing away the tightness in her throat. She struck a match and touched it to the candle's wick. A warm glow flickered to life. "Happy birthday to me," she whispered, voice barely above a breath. She leaned in and blew out the candle, making a silent, desperate wish that the coming year might be kinder. A wisp of smoke curled upward as darkness crept back around her. Sophia blinked through the blur in her eyes. One hot tear escaped and slid down her cheek. She quickly wiped it away, heart pounding with embarrassment. She could almost feel the weight of a few furtive glances from the other, diners and waitstaff. Were they pitying her? Judging her? The thought made her stomach twist. "Just eat your cake and go," she told herself. She picked up her fork and managed a small bite of the cake. It was sweet on her tongue, but she could barely taste it past the bitterness of loneliness. From a dimly lit booth at the back of the restaurant, someone observed the scene with keen, narrowed eyes. In the shadows, Lorenzo Vitale sat with one hand wrapped around a glass of whiskey, the other drumming idly on the white tablecloth. The soft glow of a wall sconce carved out the strong lines of his face. Olive skin, dark hair, a neatly trimmed beard accentuating a sharp jaw. His tailored suit barely contained the coiled power in his frame, but tonight his posture was relaxed, almost languid, as he watched the young woman by the window. He had noticed Sophia the moment she walked in. The faint tremor in her voice as she asked for a table, the forced politeness in her smile, little details that most would overlook, screamed her vulnerability to someone as observant as Lorenzo. Not to mention she was drenched from the rain despite her umbrella, and had insisted on a table with a clear view of the empty room, as if declaring she wasn't afraid to be seen alone. That quiet defiance piqued his interest. Why would anyone choose to celebrate a birthday alone? Lorenzo sipped his whiskey, eyes never leaving her. He watched Sophia light the candle and mouth those lonely words to herself. Even from across the dining room, he didn't miss the subtle shake of her shoulders as she fought to keep her composure, nor the way she furtively brushed away a tear. It struck a chord in him, one he hadn't heard in years. For a man like Lorenzo, solitude was an old companion. Many nights he dined in similar silence, in the company of guards and associates, but fundamentally alone. He had long ago accepted that it was the price of who he was. Yet seeing this young woman's loneliness laid bare stirred something almost like empathy in his guarded heart. He realized his fingers had tightened around his glass, knuckles pale. With a soft exhale, Lorenzo set it down and signaled. With a subtle tilt of his head to the nearest waiter, one of his men in plain clothes, ever stationed nearby, the man hurried over, respectful and alert. Lorenzo's voice was low and calm, but carried an unmistakable authority. His gaze flicked towards Sophia, then back to his man. "Bring her to me," he ordered quietly. Sophia had been absently pushing the cake crumbs around her plate when a polite cough at her side made her jump. She looked up, startled, to find a well-dressed waiter standing there. Oddly, she hadn't seen him approach at all. "Miss," the man said in a courteous murmur, "would you mind accompanying me? We would like to offer you a more comfortable table." Sophia blinked. "We." Her first instinct was to refuse. The quiet corner she'd chosen might have turned into a spotlight. But it was her spotlight of awkward solitude, and she wasn't keen on being moved just to ease the discomfort of a few onlookers. Heat rose in her cheeks at the thought that perhaps the restaurant staff pitied her so much they wanted to tuck her away somewhere. out of sight. "I'm fine here, really," she began softly, trying to muster confidence in her voice. The waiter leaned a fraction closer and lowered his voice conspiratorially. "The gentleman in our private lounge has requested your company, miss," he insists. Sophia followed the man's subtle nod toward the far end of the restaurant. Only then did she truly notice the secluded section partitioned by elegant, etched glass panels and lush indoor plants. In the dim golden light, she could just make out a figure sitting there. A man, watching her. Her heart skipped. Someone had been watching her. The realization sent a jolt of self-consciousness through her. How much had he seen? Her lighting a candle, talking to herself like a sad fool. The thought made her want to sink under the tablecloth. I'm not sure," she stammered. But the waiter's expectant posture and gentle smile made it clear this was more of a summons than a suggestion. Sophia glanced again toward the lounge. The man's silhouette shifted slightly. He inclined his head ever so subtly, as if acknowledging her hesitation from across the room. There was an undeniable aura about that dark figure. Magnetic, commanding. Even without seeing his face clearly, she felt it. It wasn't just that he sat in the VIP area as though it were his throne. It was the way the staff deferred to him. The waiter in front of her certainly seemed anxious to please him. Sophia's pulse quickened. Every rational part of her screamed that staying put would be wiser. Who was that man? And what could he possibly want with her? Yet another part of her, an inexplicable curiosity. Or was it fate? Some hopeful voice whispered, urged her to go. After all, tonight couldn't get much stranger or more humiliating than it already was. And maybe he just wanted to be kind. Perhaps he knew what loneliness felt like. Biting her lip, Sophia nodded and stood on unsteady legs. She smoothed her skirt, nervously brushing invisible crumbs away. "All right," she said quietly. "Just for a moment." The waiter smiled with relief and gestured for her to follow. As Sophia picked up her phone and bag, he kindly carried her cake and candle, leading her through the maze of empty tables and into the softly lit, exclusive alcove. With each step, Sophia's heart thumped harder against her ribs. She was aware of a few pairs of eyes, following her journey, hushed. Whispers from the other guests trailed in her wake. She felt like she was walking into a scene in a movie, drawn inexorably toward an unknown figure who had commanded and now received her approach. Then she saw him. Lorenzo rose from his seat as she entered the private lounge area. The first thing Sophia noticed was that he was tall, towering, over her even at a respectful distance, maybe 6'2" or 6'3". Under the tailored suit, his broad shoulders and confident stance gave an impression of strength and self-assurance. When her gaze finally met his, Sophia's breath caught. His eyes were a striking shade of green, intense and discerning, framed by dark lashes. In the low light, they seemed almost golden, and for a moment she felt pinned by that gaze, appraised. Yet not in a cruel way. It was as though he were truly seeing her, in a way few people ever had. "Buonasera, signorina." The man greeted her in a deep, smooth voice that carried a subtle Italian accent. Up close, his face matched the powerful voice. Strong, refined features, a straight nose, and a subtle scar cutting through one eyebrow, an unexpected imperfection that somehow only heightened his rugged appeal. Sophia realized she was staring and quickly lowered her eyes, heat flooding her cheeks again. "Hello," she managed, clutching her phone tightly to give her hands something to do. Now that she stood before him, the reality of the situation crashed down. What am I doing? She didn't know this man at all, and he radiated an intensity that both intrigued and unsettled her. He offered a faint smile, polite. Yet there was a hint of warmth in it that put her slightly at ease. "Happy birthday," he said, inclining his head toward the little cake now set down on the table between them. The waiter had placed it carefully and withdrawn to a polite distance. Sophia's eyes widened in surprise. "Thank you. Mister?" She trailed off, realizing she didn't even know his name. "Vitale," he supplied smoothly. "Lorenzo Vitale." "Please, have a seat, miss." Carter," she lied instinctively, blurting out a random last name that came to mind. Sophia Carter. An irrational precaution, perhaps. But something about this felt like a delicate tightrope walk. Giving her real name to a stranger who commanded private lounges and personal waitstaff made her uneasy, no matter how courteous he seemed. She hoped he wouldn't notice the slight tremor in her voice. If Lorenzo found anything amiss, he didn't show it. He rounded the table and gallantly pulled out the chair for her. Sophia hadn't seen anyone actually do that outside of old movies. It was both charming and disconcerting. She murmured a thank you and sat down, acutely aware of how close he was as he pushed the chair in gently. The clean, subtle scent of his cologne, smoky cedar and citrus, lingered in the air. It made her lightheaded for a moment. He returned to his seat across from her with a feline grace, buttoning his suit jacket with one hand as he settled in. Sophia tried not to fidget under his gaze. She could feel him studying her, not in the predatory way some men at bars had, but like he was deciphering a puzzle. "You must forgive my boldness," Lorenzo said, breaking the silence. He lifted a bottle of red wine from a cooler at the side of the table. "It's not every day we have a belladonna celebrating her birthday here alone. I thought perhaps you might allow me to offer a toast, in honor of the occasion." Sophia bit her lip, torn between flattery and embarrassment. His voice was courteous, his words surprisingly considerate. "That's very kind of you," she said cautiously, "but you really don't have to. I'm fine, really." He had already signaled to a waiter. A second later, a waiter appeared with 2 elegant wine glasses as if conjured by magic. "I insist," Lorenzo said softly, meeting her gaze. "No one should have to toast their birthday by themselves." Something in the way he said it made Sophia's chest tighten. There was an undertone of understanding in his voice, like he genuinely knew what it felt like to be in her shoes. She found herself nodding ever so slightly. The waiter poured the deep crimson liquid into their glasses and quietly stepped away. Lorenzo raised his glass, and after a hesitant moment, Sophia mirrored him. "To your health and happier days ahead," he said, his green eyes holding hers steadily. "Buon compleanno, Sophia." "Thank you," she replied softly, clinking her glass to his. "Or, grazie, is that right?" A timid smile tugged at her lips. The first real one all evening. As she attempted the Italian, a hint of a true smile ghosted across Lorenzo's lips, reaching those piercing eyes. "Perfetto," he murmured. They both sipped, and Sophia's nerves finally began to loosen their grip. The wine was excellent, rich and smooth, warming her insides with a pleasant heat. They settled into an unexpectedly comfortable silence for a moment. Sophia dared another glance at the man across from her. In the warm glow of the lounge, he appeared a few years older than her, perhaps mid-30s. There was a faint shadow of stubble on his chin that gave him a roguish look, and that tiny scar on his brow made her wonder how he'd gotten it. Everything about him radiated control and quiet confidence. Yet, he had shown her such thoughtful attention that she felt her usual defenses falter. "I hope you don't mind me asking," Lorenzo said gently, placing his glass down. "But what brings you out on a night like this all by yourself, Sophia? It's not often we see someone celebrating alone by choice. Did your friends abandon you to the storm?" Sophia tensed at the question despite his kindly phrasing. She wasn't ready to unpack the truth of it with a stranger, how her friends had dwindled after what happened, how trust felt like a luxury she couldn't afford anymore. She deflected with a half shrug and a practiced little smile. "I moved to New York not too long ago for work. I haven't really made close friends here yet, so it's just me tonight." It wasn't the whole story, but it was true enough. Her eyes dropped to her wine. She hated how pathetic that sounded. Lorenzo considered her quietly. If he sensed there was more, he was polite enough not to pry immediately. Instead, he nodded. "New York can be a lonely place until you find your footing." "That's true," Sophia murmured, surprised that he understood so readily. "And I guess I wanted to treat myself to something nice. An evening out, even if it is a bit unconventional." She gave a self-conscious laugh. He leaned forward slightly, drawing her attention back to him. "There's nothing wrong with that," he said firmly. "In fact, it's admirable. It takes strength to enjoy one's own company. Most people are too afraid to be alone." His words, spoken with quiet conviction, made Sophia's breath catch. Was that a hint of personal experience she heard? Perhaps he too knew what it was to be alone in a crowd. She found herself wanting to know more about this mysterious man who had materialized into her night. "So, do you often rescue strangers from their solitude?" she asked lightly, hoping to turn the focus away from her. "Or am I just a special case?" The corner of Lorenzo's mouth lifted, almost a smirk, but tempered by sincerity in his eyes. "You are definitely a special case." Then his expression softened. "To be honest, I don't usually do this." I value my solitude as well. But seeing you there," he paused, as if carefully choosing his words. "Let's just say I felt compelled to intervene. No one should spend their birthday singing to themselves." Sophia's face grew warm, both from his unexpected candor and the slight embarrassment that he had seen her little self serenade. "I didn't think anyone heard that," she admitted, covering her face for an instant with her hand. "It's so silly." "What's silly about it?" Lorenzo countered gently. "You deserve a celebration. If no one else was going to give you one, you gave it to yourself. There's a courage in that." There was no pity in his tone, only respect. She peeked at him from behind her fingers, finding his expression earnest. Her heart did a strange little flutter. She wasn't sure how. This man was turning one of the most mortifying nights of her life into something else, something almost bearable. "Thank you, Mr. Vitale," she said softly, lowering her hand. "I'm not sure if I should be grateful or apologize for intruding on your evening, Lorenzo." "Please," he corrected, waving off the formality. "And you have nothing to apologize for. In fact, I should apologize to you for being so forward. I hope I haven't made you uncomfortable." Sophia shook her head quickly. "No, it's all right. Just unexpected. I didn't exactly plan to end up here." He chuckled, a low, rich sound that warmed the air between them. "Life is full of surprises, no?" For the first time that night, Sophia found herself genuinely agreeing. "That it is." Lorenzo's gaze flickered over her face, as if assuring himself she truly was okay with this. Satisfied, he leaned back, a new question in his eyes. "So you moved here for work, you said. What is it that you do?" "I work in publishing," she said lightly. It wasn't glamorous, but she enjoyed it. Lorenzo inclined his head. "A fitting profession for someone with intellect and passion." Sophia's cheeks warmed at the compliment, and she was grateful he didn't press further. "What about you?" she asked, eager to shift focus. She gestured around. "You seem to have a stake in this place. Or at least everyone here listens to you." He gave a slight shrug. "You could say that. My family owns a number of businesses in the city. Restaurants, clubs, construction. We invest in various ventures around town." It was a vague answer, and Sophia couldn't help thinking of how a movie mob boss might describe his work as family business. She quickly dismissed the absurd notion. Before she could ask anything further, Lorenzo's attention snapped away. His relaxed smile faded, replaced by a more familiar severity. Sophia followed his line of sight. One of the restaurant's staff, no, not a regular staff, perhaps another of his associates, had approached and was murmuring something in Italian into Lorenzo's ear. She caught a few words, but they meant nothing to her. What she did notice was the slight tightening of Lorenzo's jaw and the way his hand flexed, once on the table before he rose calmly to his feet. "I'm afraid something has come up," Lorenzo said apologetically, though his tone had an edge now that set Sophia on alert. Gone was the relaxed companion of moments ago. He was all business, eyes sharp and posture stiff. "My men will see to it that you get home safely." Sophia's stomach dropped. He was leaving just like that? And his men? Did he mean the security-looking waiters? A swell of protest and panic rose in her. The thought of him disappearing as abruptly as he'd arrived left her oddly bereft. And something about the cool shift in his demeanor lit her own worry. "Was there trouble? Is everything all right?" she asked, standing as well. Her legs felt a bit unsteady from the wine and the sudden change of atmosphere. Lorenzo hesitated, as if weighing how much to tell her. His gaze softened just a fraction when he looked at her concern. "It's nothing for you to worry about," he said, attempting reassurance. He reached out as if to touch her arm, then drew back, his hand curling into a loose fist instead. "Just a minor business issue I need to handle. The weather has cleared, so it's a good time for my driver to take you home." Sophia didn't know why, but the idea of parting ways with this enigmatic man after all that had transpired filled her with a sudden panic. It felt like midnight was striking and the magic was about to fade, leaving her in pumpkin rags of loneliness again. Yet she also knew she couldn't very well cling to a stranger she'd met barely an hour ago. All right," she said, forcing a polite smile. "Thank you for the wine and the company. You really didn't have to, but I appreciate it." She swallowed the lump rising in her throat. She wasn't sure why she felt like crying again. Lorenzo studied her for a long moment. Something unspoken passed between them. A mutual reluctance, or maybe it was her imagination. He nodded once. It was my pleasure. And Sophia? Yes? He bent slightly, his voice lowering. Meant only for her. Take care of yourself. And remember, you're not truly as alone as you think. There was an intensity in his tone that sent a shiver through her, as if he wished he could say more. Before she could decipher it, he stepped back and gestured to Antonio, the first waiter who had approached her. Antonio appeared at her side with her coat and umbrella in hand, ready to escort her out. Lorenzo gave her one last, lingering look, a mix of concern and something else in his piercing eyes. Then he turned and strode away, phone in hand, already barking orders to someone in Italian as two other stern-faced men in suits joined him from the shadows. They flanked him like loyal sentinels as he disappeared through a side door into the stormy night. Sophia felt a strange twist in her chest at the sight of him leaving. But Antonio gently touched her elbow, drawing her attention. Miss, the car is just outside. This way, please. Clutching her purse, Sophia let herself be guided toward the exit. The main dining area was nearly empty now. Even the whispering couples had gone. The hush felt heavier than before. As they stepped out into the night, the rain had eased to a fine mist, and the city streets glistened under the streetlights. A sleek black town car idled at the curb. The driver, another stern-looking man, hopped out and opened the rear door as they approached. Sophia slid into the luxurious leather seat, her mind reeling. Antonio closed the door behind her and took the front passenger side. For a moment, Sophia considered asking them to just drop her at the nearest subway instead, riding. In a stranger's car, even a kind stranger's, probably wasn't wise. But her head was spinning from the wine and the whirlwind of the evening. And honestly, exhaustion was beginning to creep in. The emotional toll of the night was catching up. She buckled her seatbelt as the driver pulled smoothly into traffic. As the city lights streaked by, Sophia replayed the events of the last hour in her head. The mortifying lonely birthday song. The mysterious and gentle intervention of Lorenzo Vitale. His protective eyes and warm toast. Then that abrupt shift when business called him away. It felt surreal. Like a vivid dream she wasn't sure she'd truly had. She found herself touching the rim of the wine glass in her memory, recalling his words. You're not as alone as you think. What had he meant by that? Maybe just a kind platitude. And yet, an irrational part of her wondered if it had been a promise. Sophia shook her head at herself. Don't be foolish. He was just being nice. Whatever momentary connection they shared was likely over now. Her life would return to normal. A solitary apartment, a simple job, no mysterious night sweeping in to rescue her from sadness. She gazed out the window at the wet streets. A pang of emptiness formed in her chest. The night had been the most exciting thing to happen to her in ages, and now it was gone, and she felt even more alone than before. The silence of the car pressing in on her. Lightning flickered in the distant sky, illuminating the silhouette of skyscrapers. The driver navigated uptown, and Sophia realized they were heading the correct direction for her neighborhood. She hadn't even given them her address yet. Antonio must have asked her at some point, or perhaps Lorenzo had seen it from the brief look he took at her ID when she first sat. No, she hadn't given him any ID. She frowned. How did you know where I live? She asked hesitantly towards the front. Antonio met her eyes in the rearview mirror briefly. Mr. Vitale requested we take you wherever you wish, miss. I assumed home, so I was going to ask for your address. Oh. She flushed, feeling jumpy. Of course they didn't magically know. She gave him the cross streets, and he relayed it to the driver. They had been generally heading in that direction by coincidence, or maybe just leaving the downtown area. Leaning back, Sophia closed her eyes for a second, trying to steady the adrenaline still coursing through her. She'd just about convinced herself she would never see Lorenzo again when the car took a sudden turn that threw her against the seatbelt. Her eyes snapped open. What's happening? She exclaimed, alarmed. The driver's jaw was set tight. Up ahead, through the windshield, she saw what looked like two black SUVs screeching to a halt, blocking the road under a deserted overpass. They were about to drive through. Red taillights glowed like eyes in the dark. Antonio twisted around, one hand inside his jacket. Sophia's blood went cold when she realized he was gripping a gun. Get down, miss! He barked, just as the night erupted in flashes of gunfire. The next moments were a blur of chaos. Tires screeched on wet pavement as the driver swerved violently. Bullets tore through the air, shattering the rear window. Sophia yelped and threw herself to the floorboard, curling into a ball as glass rained over her. Heart pounding, she clutched the seat upholstery, a scream stuck in her throat. "This can't be real! This can't be happening!" Her mind keened even as her body moved on pure instinct. The car jerked to a halt with a jarring crunch of metal. The scent of burnt rubber and gunpowder clawed at Sophia's lungs. Outside, men shouted in harsh Italian. Through the spider-webbed remains of the back window, she glimpsed shadowy figures closing in on the disabled car. "Miss, are you hurt?" Antonio's voice cut through her panic. He had dropped low in the front seat, gun drawn and face set in grim focus. I'm okay," she stammered, though she wasn't certain that was true. Her ears rang and her whole body trembled. "Stay down," Antonio ordered. He cracked his door open a fraction, peering out. The rapid pop of gunshots had ceased. An eerie silence followed, broken only by the patter of rain and the hissing of the car's punctured radiator. Sophia's breath came in ragged gasps. Her hands were sticky. She realized they were speckled with blood from small cuts, where glass had nicked her, but nothing major. She craned her neck, trying to see over the back seat. The driver was slumped against the steering wheel, groaning, shot in the shoulder maybe, but alive. Beyond the cracked windshield, she saw the vague shapes of 2 SUVs parked askew, blocking them in. The attackers were likely regrouping for a final move. A new surge of terror flooded her veins. They were outnumbered and trapped. Lorenzo's enemies. The thought struck her cold. This had to be connected to him. Had they followed them? Were they after him or her? Before she could dwell on it, the rear passenger door was yanked open. A hulking man in a black ski mask reached in and latched onto Sophia's ankle. "Got the girl," he snarled in an accent. Russian? She had no time to think. With a yelp, Sophia kicked wildly with her free leg, catching the man in the face. He cursed and momentarily let go. "Help!" Sophia screamed, scrambling backwards across the seat. But another set of hands grabbed her by the wrists, yanking her bodily out of the car. She hit the wet pavement with a gasp of pain, rain stinging her eyes. The 2 masked thugs looming. Over her looked monstrous backlit by the SUV headlights. Sophia's mind flashed to the worst scenarios. Kidnapping, torture, a bullet in the back of the head. Sheer terror gave her a sudden strength. She thrashed and twisted as one attacker tried to pin her down. "Stop fighting, ragazza!" he hissed, pressing the muzzle of a gun to her ribs. Sophia froze, chest heaving. Her gaze darted frantically, seeking any sign of help. Where was Antonio? Had he been hit? One of the men pulled her up by the collar of her coat. He shoved her against the side of the car, holding her there with a forearm to her throat. "Where is Vitale?" he growled, breath reeking of cigarettes even through the mask. "Vitale. They were after Lorenzo." Sophia's voice shook. "I don't know," she choked out truthfully. The man holding her sneered and leaned in, gun now jabbing against her side. "Too bad." A thunderous crack split the air. The thug's body jolted against her, a fine mist of blood suddenly spraying Sophia's cheek. His eyes went wide in shock. The pressure on her throat released as he stumbled back, gurgling. Behind him, Antonio stood braced with his pistol raised, smoke curling from the barrel. The second attacker roared in fury and returned fire. "Sophia, get down!" Antonio shouted. Sophia didn't hesitate. She dropped to the ground, covering her head. 2 shots rang out in quick succession. The masked man yelped in pain and collapsed, clutching his bleeding leg. Sophia looked up in time to see Antonio stride forward and kick the fallen thug's gun away. Swiftly and without hesitation, he pistol-whipped the man into unconsciousness. The sudden quiet that followed was jarring. It was over as fast as it began. Chest heaving, Sophia pushed herself up to hands and knees. Adrenaline coursed acid-hot through her veins. She stared at the 2 attackers, one motionless in a spreading pool of blood, the other out cold, and bile rose in her throat. Antonio rushed to her side, kneeling. "Miss, are you hurt?" he asked urgently, scanning her with worried eyes. Sophia opened her mouth, but no words came, just a ragged sob. She managed a shake of her head. Aside from minor cuts and bruises, she seemed physically okay. Her mind was another story, reeling and struggling to process that she was alive, that a moment more and she might not have been. Antonio's hard demeanor softened. "It's all right now," he said almost gently. "We need to move, though. There could be more." Indeed, distant shouts and screeching tires suggested some attackers had fled and would regroup. Antonio helped Sophia unsteadily to her feet. The driver, Carlo, had stumbled out of the car, one arm dangling bloodily. Antonio cursed under his breath and slung the injured man's arm over his shoulder. Sophia, still shaking, retrieved her purse from the car out of reflex. Her phone was miraculously still inside. "Come," Antonio said, guiding her toward one of the SUVs, ironically the very vehicles the ambushers arrived in. Where are we going?" she managed to ask, voice trembling uncontrollably. "To someplace safe," Antonio replied. He ushered her and Carlo into the back seat of the least damaged SUV. Two more of Lorenzo's men she recognized them now from the restaurant were already there. Having secured the scene, they must have followed in a separate car and intercepted the tail end of the ambush. One man immediately started driving while the other tended Carlo's wound with supplies from a kit in the glove box. Sophia huddled in the seat, wrapping her arms around herself. Her soaked dress clung to her skin, but she barely felt the cold. Numbness was taking hold, the delayed shock of near death. Antonio, seated beside her, dialed a number on his phone. "Boss, we have her," he said as soon as the line picked up. Sophia's head snapped up, eyes widening. "Lorenzo. Yeah, a few scrapes, nothing major. Carlo's hit but alive. We're headed to the safe house." A pause. "Understood." He hung up and glanced at Sophia. "Mr. Vitale will meet us there." Sophia sagged in relief and closed her eyes. Lorenzo was okay. He must have known about the attack. Maybe he'd been in one himself. The thought made her stomach knot. But he was alive and coming to her. The coil of fear inside her unwound slightly, knowing that. The SUV sped through the night. Sophia lost track of how long the tense drive lasted. Eventually, they pulled into a private underground garage. The building above was an elegant high-rise, from what she could tell stepping out of the car. The men escorted her through a back elevator, up many floors, and into a spacious loft apartment. It was clearly a secure location, perhaps one of Lorenzo's own properties. The windows were bulletproof glass, the foyer guarded by two more of his men. The space was modern and lavishly furnished, but Sophia barely registered details beyond the fact that it felt safe and quiet. Antonio led her to a leather sofa. "Sit, miss. The doctor will be here soon to check you over." Indeed, a middle-aged man with a black bag arrived within minutes. He cleaned the shallow cuts on her arms and face while murmuring reassuring words. Sophia answered his questions on autopilot, assuring that aside from some soreness and a pounding head, she was uninjured. He offered her a mild sedative, which she declined. Her mind was too wired to even consider sleep right now. All she truly wanted was for Lorenzo to walk through that door. It wasn't long before he did. The elevator opened directly into the loft, and Lorenzo strode in flanked by two bodyguards. Sophia shot to her feet at once. He was a sight, drenched from the rain again, hair disheveled, and a feral fury barely leashed in his eyes. But the moment those eyes found her, they softened in palpable relief. "Sophia," he breathed, crossing the space in quick, long strides. Before she knew it, she was enveloped in a crushing embrace. Every tension in her body finally released as she sank against his solid warmth. Lorenzo was trembling, perhaps only she could notice it, pressed as she was to his chest. His heart thudded against her ear. "I'm sorry," he murmured, voice low and rough. His hand cradled the back of her head protectively. "I'm so sorry, Bella. I never wanted you in danger like that." Sophia choked back a sob, clutching fistfuls of his coat. The reality of how close she'd come to never feeling this embrace again hit her hard. I thought I was going to die," she whispered, voice cracking. Lorenzo held her tighter, as if he could fuse her to him and shield her forever. "I know. I'm sorry," he repeated, each word laden with self-reproach. "Those bastards will pay for this. I swear it," reluctantly. He eased back just enough to cup her face between his hands. His eyes roamed over her, checking every bruise and bandage the doctor had left. The anger simmering in him warred with concern. "They hurt you," he said, almost to himself, his thumb ghosting over a butterfly bandage on her temple. "Just a little." Sophia managed a shaky smile. "I'll be okay." Lorenzo's throat worked, and he bowed his head, pressing his forehead to hers. "You shouldn't have had to go through that. I dragged you into my world, and I almost got you killed on your birthday." His voice was thick with anguish. "It's my fault." Sophia shook her head in his hands. "You saved me," she replied emphatically. "Antonio, your men, they saved me." If I hadn't met you, I'd still be alone, and possibly in danger without even knowing it. She wasn't even sure what she was saying, only that she needed him not to blame himself for this. Blame the men who attacked us, she thought. Blame fate or whatever, but not yourself. Lorenzo looked unconvinced. Guilt etched deep lines on his handsome face. He opened his mouth, perhaps to argue, but a wet cough from the doorway interrupted. Antonio stood there looking a bit sheepish. Boss, Carlo's stable. We've beefed up security around the building just in case. And, we're going to head downstairs to give you some privacy. Lorenzo gave a curt nod. Thank you, Antonio. For everything. Antonio flashed a rare grin. Just doing my job, sir. He turned to Sophia and inclined his head respectfully. I'm glad you're safe, miss. With that, he and the remaining guards filed out, leaving Sophia and Lorenzo alone in the quiet loft. A silence settled, broken only by the soft patter of rain against the wide windows. Lorenzo guided Sophia gently back to sit on the sofa. He shed his soaked jacket and draped it over her shoulders. Realizing belatedly she was still damp and shivering, she pulled it around herself and breathed in the scent of him clinging to the fabric. It was strangely grounding. They sat close, knees touching. For a long moment, neither knew quite what to say. At last, Sophia mustered her voice. Who were those people? She asked, though she was certain of the answer. Lorenzo's jaw tightened. Enemies of mine. They were waiting for me, I suspect, and saw us leave together. Regret darkened his expression. They wanted to hurt me, and so they went after you. Sophia absorbed that with a shaky breath. She had feared as much. Is it always like this for you? Not always, he replied quietly, but often enough. He brushed a damp lock of hair back from her forehead. I never wanted you to be exposed to it. I tried to send you away precisely to keep you safe, but I underestimated how bold my rivals would be. She covered his hand with hers. I walked into your life on my own, she said softly. None of this is your fault. Lorenzo looked at her, anguish and hope mingling in his eyes. I can have my people take you away from all this. If you want, he said, voice raw with remorse. You'd never have to be part of my world again. Sophia realized with sudden clarity that the idea of walking away from him now hurt far, worse than anything else that had happened. This night, terrifying and traumatic, as it was, had also brought her something precious. She had felt more seen, more alive in Lorenzo's presence than in years of supposedly safe living. She reached up and placed a trembling hand on his cheek, forcing him to meet her gaze. I don't want to leave, she whispered. Relief and disbelief flickered across Lorenzo's face. You don't? Sophia shook her head, tears spilling freely now. I know it's crazy. We barely know each other, but I feel safer with you than without you, and I don't want tonight to be the end of whatever this is. A soft, broken sound escaped him, half laugh, half sob. He turned his head and pressed a fervent kiss into her palm. You have no idea what it means to hear you say that, he murmured. You don't have to go anywhere, Sophia. I will keep you safe, I swear it. She managed a wobbly smile. We might need to work on the whole being attacked part of our relationship. Though, a genuine laugh rumbled from his chest at that, easing the remaining tension. I promise that's not usually how my evenings go, he said, smiling through the moisture in his eyes. Their hands remained clasped, a lifeline binding them together. Exhaustion was catching up to Sophia at last, physical and emotional. Her adrenaline had ebbed, leaving her limbs leaden. Lorenzo noticed her drooping posture and stood gently. You need rest. Come, I'll show you to a room where you can sleep. I'll stand guard myself if it makes you feel better. There was no teasing in his tone. He meant it sincerely. Sophia rose but didn't release his hand. Stay with me? Just until I fall asleep, she asked quietly, feeling oddly shy. His answer was to slip an arm around her waist and guide her down the hall. He opened the door to a guest bedroom that was as sumptuous as a five-star hotel's, all plush ivory linens and tasteful artwork. Sophia sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly bone-weary and uncertain. I'll be right outside, Lorenzo said softly, brushing a thumb over the back of her hand. It struck him that she might not want him hovering while she changed or showered. Take all the time you need. If you need anything, clothes, toiletries, Rosa, my housekeeper, will bring them. Just call out. Rosa had, at some point, laid out towels and a folded set of women's pajamas on the bed, likely bought in a hurry but in Sophia's size. The older woman must have stalked the room while the doctor was tending to Sophia earlier. Sophia made a mental note to thank her later. "Thank you," Sophia murmured to Lorenzo. She gazed up at him, reluctant to let go of his hand. The events of the night swirled in her mind. Too many emotions to name. Grateful, frightened, astonished, and underlying it all, a blossoming affection for the man standing before her, a man who had gone from stranger to something far more complicated in the span of a single evening. Lorenzo seemed to sense her turmoil. He bent down and pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead, a tender, almost reverent touch. "Try to sleep," he whispered. "You're safe here." With extreme reluctance, he released her and stepped back. "Good night, Sophia." "Good night, Lorenzo," she replied, her voice soft. He lingered a moment, as if wanting to say more, but he merely gave her a reassuring nod and slipped out of the room, pulling the door nearly closed behind him. In the stillness that followed, Sophia sank onto the bed fully. Her body ached. Her mind was a storm of what-ifs and newfound hopes. "You're not as alone as you think." He had promised her that, and for the first time in a very long time, she allowed herself to believe it. Sleep claimed her in fits and starts. She showered, tended to her bruises, and changed into the soft pajamas. Every noise made her jump at first, but gradually the events of the night caught up and dragged her into a heavy slumber. Sometime in the darkest hours before dawn, a nightmare jolted her awake, masked, faces and cold gun barrels pressed to her skin. She bolted upright with a cry before she realized she was safe in the penthouse. Within seconds, her door flew open and Lorenzo was there, a gun in hand and wild concern in his eyes. "Sophia!" he panted, scanning the room for threats. She pressed a hand to her mouth, feeling foolish as tears of relief welled up. "I'm okay," she managed between trembling breaths. "Just a bad dream." Lorenzo's shoulders relaxed. He set the gun aside on a dresser and crossed to her bed. Without a word, he sat on the edge and gathered her shaking form into his arms. Sophia clung to him, burrowing against his warmth and solidity. "Shh, it's all right," he soothed, stroking her damp hair. "I'm here." And he stayed. Lorenzo held her until her sobs subsided and the nightmare's grip loosened. When she finally lay back down, he started to pull away, but her fingers caught his sleeve. "Stay," she whispered, barely audible. He didn't ask if she was sure. Wordlessly, Lorenzo kicked off his shoes and slipped under the covers beside her. Sophia curled into him, head on his chest, the steady thump of his heart against her ear more potent than any lullaby. He draped an arm around her, and for the first time in over a year, Sophia felt truly safe on her birthday night. By the time dawn's first light crept into the room, both of them were fast asleep, wrapped in each other's arms. Morning light filtered through the curtains when Sophia awoke, bringing with it a tentative sense of peace. For a moment, in the softness of the unfamiliar bed, she forgot the horrors of the night before. Then a twinge in her shoulder brought it all back in a rush. The gunfire, the narrow escape, and Lorenzo. She turned her head on the pillow and found him still beside her, lying on his back. Sometime in the early morning, he had shifted away just a little, perhaps unsure of how close he should remain. But one of her hands was still clasped in his, resting between them atop the sheets. Sophia carefully propped herself up on one elbow, taking the opportunity to really look at him. In the gentle morning glow, Lorenzo appeared younger. The hard lines of his face relaxed in sleep. There was a bruise forming on his cheekbone, from some unseen scuffle and faint. Shadows under his eyes, evidence of the toll the night had taken on him too. And yet he looked peaceful. She wondered how long it had been since he'd slept beside someone he cared about. If ever, an inner voice added, remembering his admission of lonely years. As if sensing her thoughts, Lorenzo's eyes fluttered open. He blinked in confusion for a half-second. Then his gaze focused on her and softened. "Buongiorno," he said, voice rough from sleep. "Good morning," she replied gently. They lay there facing each other, hands still intertwined. A delicate serenity filled the space between them, as if this were the most natural thing in the world. "Did you sleep?" he asked after a moment, concern edging in. Sophia gave a small smile. "Better than I expected to. Thank you for staying." He lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles, a sweet courtly gesture that made her heart flutter. "There's nowhere else I'd want to be." A warmth spread through her at his words. Before she could overthink it, she leaned forward and pressed a soft kiss to his cheek. "Thank you," she whispered again. "Not just for last night, but for everything. Saving her life, caring for her, giving a damn when no one else did." Lorenzo turned his head slightly, and suddenly her lips grazed the corner of his mouth instead. They froze, so close their breaths mingled. Sophia's pulse quickened. Slowly, Lorenzo closed the remaining distance, capturing her lips in a tender, unhurried kiss. It was like nothing she'd experienced before. Both a question and an answer, a promise and an apology. Sophia's eyes slid shut as she returned the kiss with equal care. For a few perfect seconds, there was no mafia, no danger, no past or future, only this. When they parted, Lorenzo rested his forehead against hers, smiling. "Happy birthday, Sophia," he murmured. "I'm sorry it turned out so eventful." She laughed quietly, brushing the tip of his nose with hers. "It's certainly one I won't forget." They eventually convinced themselves to leave the cocoon of the bedroom. Lorenzo insisted on cooking her some breakfast. A belated birthday feast, he called it, though it was just eggs and toast. Still, the domesticity of watching this feared. Mafia boss fuss over a frying pan and nearly burn the toast made. Sophia giggle more than once. As they ate at the kitchen island, they talked quietly about lighter things, favorite books. Sophia's passion for literature brought an approving grin from Lorenzo. Travel destinations he recommended. He spoke of a coastal Italian town from his childhood that lit a wistful spark in his eyes. It felt astonishingly normal, and Sophia cherished every minute. Finally, though, reality intruded in the form of a phone buzzing. Lorenzo glanced at the message, and the content on the screen hardened his expression. "I have to deal with something," he said reluctantly, meeting her gaze. "It's about last night." Sophia's heart sank. She knew what that meant, retribution. Violence answering violence. "Moretti?" she asked softly, recalling the name Antonio had muttered to him during a brief update earlier. Lorenzo nodded once. "Tommaso Moretti, head of a rival family. It seems he ordered the attack." His voice was flat, controlled, but Sophia could see the tempest of anger beneath. He rose from the table, shoulders squared as though preparing to don his armor again. Sophia rose too, reaching out and catching his hand. "Lorenzo, be careful." His features gentled at her concern. He pulled her close and pressed a kiss to her temple. "I will. I just need to make sure he can't hurt you, or us again." Sophia swallowed, wanting to plead with him to avoid unnecessary bloodshed, but she also understood this was his world, his responsibility. The man had nearly killed both of them. As much as violence unsettled her, she couldn't find it in herself to beg forgiveness for Moretti. "If you need to, do things I understand," she said carefully, tracing a finger along the lapel of his suit. "Just come back to me, in one piece." Lorenzo's eyes warmed. "Nothing could keep me from coming back to you," he replied firmly. He left then, with Antonio and a phalanx of soldiers in tow. Sophia watched from the window as their motorcade of dark vehicles pulled out into the sunlit morning. Fear gnawed at her, but underlying it was an unexpected strength. She believed in him. Believed in them. The hours that followed were nerve-wracking. She busied herself with a hot shower and fresh clothes rose ahead, kindly procured a few items that miraculously fit. But by midday, Sophia found herself pacing the penthouse like a caged tigress. At last, near evening, the elevator door slid open and Lorenzo stepped through. Sophia practically flew across the room and into his arms. He winced slightly. Only then did she notice he was moving gingerly, a stiffness to his gait. "You're hurt!" she exclaimed, pulling back to scan him. "Just a scratch," he tried to dismiss, but she saw the telltale bulge of bandages under his shirt near his side. Sophia's eyes filled with alarm and worry. "Lorenzo." He caught her face in his hands, stroking her cheeks with his thumbs. "Shh, I'm all right. Moretti won't bother us ever again. It's over." There was a finality in his tone that told her not to ask for details. She didn't need to. The haunted look that had clung to him since last night was gone, replaced by relief. Sophia closed her eyes and pressed her forehead to his, overwhelmed with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, though she wasn't even sure for what exactly. Coming back alive, protecting her, choosing them over vengeance alone. Lorenzo kissed her, slow and sweet, leaving them both breathless. "It's I who should be thanking you," he murmured against her lips. "You've given me something I thought I'd never have." "What's that?" she asked softly. He rested a hand over her heart. "Someone to fight for, someone to come home to." Tears sparkled in Sophia's eyes. She covered his hand with hers. "You have me," she promised. "And I have you. That's all I need." A rare, genuine smile spread across Lorenzo's face. A smile just for her, full of hope. In that moment, Sophia knew the walls around his heart had finally crumbled. And he was offering it to her, scars and all. She accepted it without hesitation, pressing herself into the safe haven of his embrace. Outside the penthouse windows, the city blazed golden with the setting sun. It felt like the beginning of a new dawn in both of their lives. Though danger and darkness had thrown them together, what they had forged was real, a love tempered by fire, unyielding and true. Sophia had celebrated her birthday alone, expecting nothing more than a forgettable night. Instead, fate had brought her Lorenzo Vitale, a man who had risked everything to keep her safe, and who taught her that her heart could beat for someone else again. And as Lorenzo held her close, murmuring Italian endearments that made her blush, Sophia realized that perhaps her wish had indeed been granted. She would never have to sing happy birthday to herself again, because from this day forward, whatever challenges came, they would face them together hand in hand.